Regular Human Geography B. Unit 5 is Culture. These notes will contain 4 content objectives with embedded I can statements. Starting with content objective 1, explain the difference between folk and pop culture. Explaining the difference between folk and pop culture should be broken down in the following I can statements. Define habit, taboo, and values. Second, describe key characteristics of culture. 3, compare and contrast folk and pop culture. 4, explain how pop culture is a threat to folk culture. What is culture? Culture is made up of values, material items, and political institutions. It's a collection of customs. So habits are practiced by repetitive acts practiced by individuals. Customs are embraced habits by a group of people. Taboos are unacceptable in some cultures, and usually there's a tie to religion, such as in the Islamic faith, practitioners are not allowed to eat pig or pork. Pork is a taboo to Muslim practitioners of Islam. Another taboo would be scaled fish. Scaled fish are not consumed by those of Judaism. That would be a taboo. There are 2 cultures on the global landscape. One is folk culture, the other is popular culture. Characteristics of folk culture. It is small. It is homogeneous. It is isolated, so found in small areas around the globe, so it is dispersed. And it's oftentimes local, meaning that they have a common government, they have a common language, they have a common ethnicity, and they have common customs. Pop culture is different. It is on a large scale. It spans the globe. It is widespread. It is not isolated. It is not local. It covers the global economy or the globalized world. What are some examples of folk culture and pop culture? Let's compare the 2 in this T-chart. When we look at characteristics of distribution, we already talked about them, so let's move to origin. Folk culture is anonymous, and it's developed many millennials back. So some pre-records historical information or information gathering. And pop culture is more recent. We know the creators, we know the hearths. The hearths come from core countries or DTM Stage 4 countries. They're found in large urban centers. And those large urban centers where we'll have a large congregation of multinational corporations that will hierarchically spread or diffuse the pop culture. Whereas folk culture only moves when people move through relocation diffusion. And the role of women, folk culture, they are submissive to males, whereas in pop culture, they have expanded roles or opportunities. However, like we learned in our trimester 1, Human Geography 1, according to the United Nations, there is not one country on earth that has equality between males and females. And when we look at environment, they're more connected. Folk culture uses environmental determinism a lot of times to shape their cultural landscape, whereas pop culture uses possibilism, where they modify their land. It becomes destructive, where they use mass amounts of materials and animals, and it leads to pollution. Examples of each of the folk and pop cultures, again, we can see the small cultures represented in the examples by folk culture, and we can see the pop culture are very large symbolic organizations like the food retailer McDonald's or the technology retailer of Apple, or celebrities such as Justin Bieber. We can look at the diffusion. And this is, I'm sorry. So the TV is to the left, so we can see the diffusion of the TV started in the United States, spread to Europe, and by the 2005, now it's spread globally. Then we see the internet diffuses, and it's diffusing much faster than that of the TV, so it spreads pop culture much faster than it did between the years of 1950 and 2005. And then today, what's spreading it even faster is social media. What is the threat to full culture? Well, cultural imperialism. Full culture creates a homogeneous landscape. It creates a uniform landscape that's designed by multinational corporate companies, such as McDonald's, where you see the M and you see the same interior of a McDonald's if it was in China or if it was in Los Angeles. And the same for gas stations, hotels, other retailers. It creates a cultural landscape, which is seen as cultural imperialism. But also, cultural imperialism can be felt politically. Well, that'd be loss of customs. That'd be have homogenous customs that as a result of popular culture or uniform landscape. And then Western ideals. Western ideals can be seen as the stylized violence, glorification of youth, um, democracy, capitalism. Those are all seen as Western ideals, and parts of the world reject those ideals. Empowerment of women is rejected by some folk cultures because they see the important role of women taking care of the family and nurturing their youth. And also, the media is controlled by the Western media. Most media in the West is controlled by private companies, whereas in the Eastern Hemisphere, most is controlled by the government. So, again, parts of the world where we see folk culture, they see the media as a threat with their news and their biased reporting of news. And it threats their, again, creates a conflict with social customs. Conflicts with government censorship. So we see censorship in, for instance, in China. China censors all pop culture, media, outside influence, and only allows a select few that's decided by the government. All right, 5.2 and 5.3 will list the major characteristics of English language, and 5.3 explain how languages relate to one another. The ICANN statements: 1. Explain the distribution of global languages. 2. Discuss the major historical eras to the diffusion of English languages. 3. Define dialect and identify key differences between British and American English. What are the basics of language? We have 6,900 languages in the world. 11 are spoken by 100 million or more. It's the most common form of oral communication. It can also be written. Countries may have an official language. Does the U.S. have an official language? No, it does not. It has a standard language. That English language is standard in political and economic institutions. We can see the diffusion of global languages. Indo-European is the most widely diffused language in the world. Sino-Tibetan has the most speakers, with Mandarin being the language spoken by the most people in the world. And then Arabic, which comes from Afro-Asiatic language family, is the largest language in North Africa and Southwest Asia. Here we can see Chinese. Mandarin is the largest, has nearly 3 times as many speakers as Spanish, and Spanish has about 15 million more speakers than English on a global scale. How is English diffused? It's diffused in over 57 countries. It's a first language of 300 million people, and over 1 billion are fluent in English. English diffused globally through British imperialism, and starting in the 1600s through the 1700s and the height of the British Empire in the 1800s. And when it diffused to the United States, or to the American colonies and later the United States in 1776, we can see so many influences of English in our cultural landscape, through the language on our money, to the language spoken in schools, to the language spoken in government, to the language spoken in our economic institutions, and then later spreads to other parts of colonized and imperialized countries. And the U.S. spread it to Philippines and Puerto Rico. We can see English widely diffused, and is the official or predominant language in the following countries. How did English originate? Many different social groups contributed to modern English. One of the first were the Celts, with a series of invasions that had shaped English. They invaded the Germanic tribes, the Anglo-Saxons and Jutes. So they came from the Germanic branch. And now we have the infusion of Celt and Germanic branches that will slowly evolve the English language. And then also the social group of the Vikings had an influence on the modern English language. And then the Normans who spoke French had an impact on the modern day language. And so today's language is a collection of various social groups and their historical influences. We look at the invasions, we can see right here with the Celts, the Normans, and the Vikings that lead to the formation of modern English. Dialect is a regional variation. It varies in language. It can vary in spelling, it can vary in vocabulary, and it can vary in pronunciation. How it does not vary is in alphabet. We can see it in word passages. Isoglosses form. Those are vernacular boundaries. They're overlapping boundaries. We can't really tell when a dialect changes. There's not a delineated line like a formal region. It overlaps, and we can't see that clear delineated boundary. The English dialect exists in various countries and is very different than the United Kingdom or British dialect. How is British English different than American English or vice versa? They differ in vocabulary. American English, they had different landscapes, they had different objects, different experiences in the New World than British England. Spelling, they differ because Noah Webster created the U.S. American English dialect, where Oxford was the British English dictionary. As Noah created the dictionary for the U.S. with the new objects and experiences, it brought a heightened sense of U.S. nationalism. Pronunciation is different because the isolation of the Atlantic Ocean was an intervening obstacle for hundreds of years, and there are different outside historical influences on American English. We can look at our major dialects here in the United States. We can see also in the game of Duck, Duck, Goose, or Duck, Duck, Grade Goose, or Duck, Duck, Grade Duck, sorry. We can see dialects in games. We can see it in how we reference a soft drink beverage. In the northern regions, northern and western regions, they use the term pop, whereas in the south, they more likely to use Coke. And then northeast and the southwest, they use soda or soda pop. All right, 5.2 continue. Classify key global language families. Explain the difference between the evolution of language family, branch, and individual language. How are languages classified? Historically, before recorded history, there were families, then they evolved 2,000 years later into branches, then into groups, and then the most modern form into language. Over 100 language families. Nearly half come from the Indo-European language family. 46% of languages today come from the Indo-European language family. The second largest is the Sino-Tibetan. That's primarily spoken in Eastern and Southeastern Asia. And Indo-European and Sino-Tibetan are about 2/3 of all languages spoken today. Other significant families are Afroasiatic in Northern Africa and Southwest Asia, Austronesian in Southeast Asia and Australia, the Niger-Congo in Sub-Saharan Africa. We can see how language families, they relate to common ancestral language branches, more recent ancestral language. We can see English was an Indo-European family. It was influenced by the Germanic branch and the West Germanic language group. We can see Indo-European has the most widely diffused languages, where it diffuses into the Indo-Aryan branch, with the largest language being Hindi or Bengali, spoken in South Asia, specifically India. Then we see the Balto-Slavic, with the largest language being Russian. We see Romance in Southern Europe, as well as Eastern Europe and also South America, with Spanish being the largest, and then West Germanic, where we see in Northern Europe as well as Western Europe. And then the second largest language family, Sino-Tibetan, with the largest family being Mandarin, second largest being the Wu language, and then the third largest being Cantonese. Indo-Iranian is Hindi, Balto-Slavic, Russian, Romance, Spanish, Portuguese, French, Italian, and Romansh. And the fall of Rome led to differentiation of these Romance languages. And here we can see the Indo-European language families and branches in Europe and as well as Asia. Sino-Tibetan family, Chinese, there's no single language. In China, Mandarin is the largest dialect. It's the most spoken language in the world. It has the most speakers of any language in the world. 5.4, discuss how languages can lead to conflict. Answer the I can statements. Explain how language barriers cause conflict in Belgium and Canada. 2, discuss how Switzerland is a peaceful multilingual state but has distinct language boundaries. And 3, define lingua francas and explain how major lingua francas are in the world regions. How do languages affect multilingual countries? Well, they affect countries differently. Belgium, for instance, you have the French, which are the Flemish, and you also have the Walloons, which are heavily influenced by the Netherlands. So you have Wallonia and Flanders. Flanders will be in the north and Wallonia will be in the south. And they're semi-autonomous because there's conflict and there's feelings of separating into two countries based on the language conflict. Switzerland has 4 official languages. It's more peaceful. They have language regions. One region is French, another is Italian, and the third is German and Romansh. And all 4 languages are spoken in the government, and they have near major cities languages of signs in all 4 languages. So it's a peaceful multilingual state, unlike Belgium. And it's a decentralized government. Canada has French and English. A fourth of Canadians speak French, mostly in the Quebec region. Our government has made French mandatory in Quebec. Conflicts has led to feelings of separatist movement, the Quebec French separatist movement. Do you think the U.S. could ever be a multilingual country? Think Spanish. All right, here shows you the Flanders in the north and the Wallons in the south. We see multilingualism in signage in Belgium, multilingualism in Switzerland. What is a lingua franca? It is a commerce language. So you communicate with different people through global trade, commerce. Swahili is a lingua franca in East Asia or East Africa. Hindi in South Asia, Pakistan, India. Well, Punjabi is spoken in Pakistan, but Hindi is the most widely spoken lingua franca in South Asia. Russian in the Russian Federation and former republics of the Russian or USSR. English has become the most dominant world lingua franca because most MDCs teach English as a second language. However, what language is lingua franca is growing and threatening English? If you said Mandarin, that is correct. When we have mixing of languages, they're called pidgin languages, such as Spanglish. They mix languages to convert to a more simple language. And that will be the end. That's the wrap.